Welcome back. Today I'd like to share some of the best advice I've ever gotten when trying to learn something very complicated. It came from one of my sensei. I was learning Shidari Yanagi-Ryu, and he said to me, "You've got to make it your own." So let's talk about that and how we can apply it to yogic techniques of meditation. So let's get into it. So I was in Shidari Yanagi-Ryu. We were learning a samurai martial art, a family art, which had been passed down from one generation to another. And it's a beautiful story if you'd like to look it up. Don Anjay and my career in Shidari Yanagi-Ryu. Beautiful little story, reads like the Karate Kid, and shows his love of this martial art. And so I was studying that in his garage day after day, and we were learning these techniques. They were very, very precise. They were handed down for generations, and so kind of sacred. And you weren't allowed to just make things up. You had to learn them in such a way which was precise. You had to understand exactly what the technique was attempting to do, what all of the internal mechanics were doing, so that you could reproduce the technique exactly as it was meant to be executed by that lineage which was behind you. So very, very much like the technique of Kriya Yoga. There's this lineage, and they want to pass down their learnings to us. We can't just make things up. We want to understand exactly what they meant. And that's the beautiful thing about being part of an oral tradition which has been handed down. You know exactly what your teacher said to you. I don't have to refer to a book. I refer to my teacher. He's the one who explained how it is meant to work. So I was in this martial art. We were trying to learn these very, very specific things, these very, very specific techniques, which are answers to very, very specific problems of attack, right? So we're responding to very specific attacks in order to understand the underlying principles that are in the technique. And so it's a lot going on, and you're trying to, by repetition, soak in the principles into your psychology, into your conscious understanding, into your subconscious understanding, which means into your body as well. So all of this soaking is going on, that you're trying to get these principles into yourself. And it was very, very difficult. And at a certain point, Jeremy Brizelli said something to me. He was the inheritor of this art. He was the prodigy of Don Anjay. And he said to me, "You've got to make it your own." I'm like, I got to make it my own? You've got to make it your own. But these are very specific things that we're trying to learn, and it's from this lineage, and I'm not allowed to just make it up. He goes, "I didn't tell you to make it up. I said you've got to figure out the way to make it your own. You have to get so familiar with the technique that it becomes your own. It becomes, you understand the flavor of it. You understand the taste of it. You understand what's inside of the technique. The language that the technique is teaching to you, you understand what it is saying to you. You're getting into the heart of it. You're making it your own. When you come to the breath and you watch the breath and you watch the breath and you watch the breath, that's one layer. But when you control the breath and you make that out-breath longer, and now because of that, you enter into HRV resonance and your heart rate goes down and you feel that peace. Now, this technique of breath control, it is your own. It's becoming your own. We talk about bhakti, 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 bhakti. We talk about bhakti, we talked about puja, and you do these puja, and you do this bhakti, and you do, and then one day you feel the love of it. You feel some of that love, that real taste of the left amygdala of bliss and love and joy. You feel some of that, and now it's your own. Now it's your own. You're getting into the heart of it. So you're doing a technique, and you're doing a technique, and you're doing a technique, and then your breath slows down, and you get into this long pause, and you're entering into the tranquil breath. And you just sit there and you soak it in and you enjoy that tranquil breath. And now it's your own. That technique, it's becoming your own. It's your technique now. You have made it your own. You're getting into the heart of it, you see. The first day that I met Ashok, he told me, my only job is to get you to the medulla where you can Google God. In other words, you're coming into this very, very deep state. You're ascending into your upper nervous system. You're getting very, very close to the higher self. And these downloads start to happen. He said, you would Google God. This download state comes to you. And the intuition starts to connect to you. And now you're following your own intuition. You're not following your ego. You're not making this up. You're listening to the small, quiet voice inside of you. You're getting into the heart of things, and you're following that small little voice of intuition, which always feels parental. It always feels like it has your very best interest at heart. It is always inspirational. It is always a little bit surprising. There's a sense to it. Oh, that makes sense, not from an outward standpoint, but from a parental standpoint, from this higher self standpoint, this lofty standpoint. That still small voice will speak to you, and that is your intuition. That is the download. And it doesn't taste like the ego. It doesn't taste like what I want, right? It's not your id, it's not your ego, it's something else. It's this other thing, that still small voice inside. That's the download, you see? And you start to follow that. And that is making the spiritual path, the meditative path, making your life your own, making that path your own. You've come into the heart of things. And we can always check. There is a Vedic way of learning, and that is to study the scriptures, study the Bhagavad Gita, study Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, then go and listen to your teacher, to your meditative teacher. Listen to what they're saying to you. Follow their instructions. See how it aligns with what you were told from the scripture. And then go and practice, and then see what arises because of that practice, and then go and check and see that it's all aligning all the way back. And so you go out and you follow your intuition, and you see where it takes you. And then you go back and you check with your teacher and with the scripture, and you make sure all of that aligns. And you're always asking, am I going in the right direction? And you do that over and over and over and over, and you get confidence in listening to your own intuition, and you know when you're going the right way. There will be confirmations. The interior world will open up to you in a new way, in a new depth. That's your confirmation. And that aligns with what your teacher was saying, and it aligns with what the scripture was saying. And that's the Vedic mode of learning. So we start with the scripture, we don't end there. We go to the teacher, we don't end there. We do the technique, we don't end there. We go into that phase of enjoying and being and experiencing these deep states. And then we see how that aligns with everything else, this whole track. You see? It all comes together, it all aligns. It's not about the scripture, it's not about the teacher, it's not about the technique. It's about that deep state which is in alignment with everything else. And that's how we follow the inner voice. We follow that inner, small little voice. Not the loud voice of the ego, but the small little voice of knowing and intuition, which is guiding us in a parental-like fashion, guiding us into that deeper state, into those deeper understandings, into this place where we can soak in the deeper principles of the higher self. So you're going to be practicing, and the intuition will whisper to you. And you want to follow that, not the ego. You want to follow the whisper of the intuition, of the higher self. Learn to differentiate. Here's my talkity-talk voice. Here's my desire voice. Here is the small voice of intuition, this parental, inspirational, loving, kind, wanting my very best. That small voice, I'm going to listen. And you follow it. And that's really the only way to keep going deep in meditation. You can't just follow the scripture. There's not enough scripture. You can't just follow the teacher. There's not enough time to hear everything. You cannot just follow the technique. It's not enough. You have to come into that deep place and feel it and experience it and follow the small voice of your own intuition. That's how it's set up. So one of my all-time favorite quotes from the Buddha, "He whose conquest nobody can conquer again, into whose conquest nobody in this world can enter. By what track can you trace him? The awakened, of infinite range, the trackless." You go on following that small voice of intuition. You make sure it aligns, yes, but you follow that small voice of intuition. You see where it takes you, and nobody can follow you. Nobody can understand all the learning and all of the choices that led you to this moment. This huge story of your soul. Nobody can follow it exactly. We can follow it in archetypes. We can follow it in the big picture, but nobody can do it the way that you have done it exactly. And so you are going into this trackless land. So make it your own. Follow that small voice. Come into the heart of your own practice. It's a whole new world. So I hope you loved this. If you did, be sure to hit that bell down below so I can see all of it next time.